Welcome to video 1 for the DH.89 Dragon Rapide. This particular video is going to take you through the assembly of the nacelles for the aircraft. Here we are down on the build board, and this first video will involve building the nacelle internals, the framework of the nacelle, and it involves a few different parts, mainly from the 2mm foam sheet that you get in the pack for the nacelles itself. This is sheet 1. As you can see, I've already used a whole bunch of parts to put this particular nacelle together, and we'll use these parts here to build our second nacelle. At the moment, the nacelles themselves are neither left nor right. That'll only come when we come to mount them. They build exactly the same. They're not mirrored in any way. They are both equal at this stage. So other parts that we're going to use, obviously we've got some plywood here. We've got a couple of little magnets that go in, and we've got a wheel. We've got a little axle that you can't see there, but we'll come to that when we come to finish off the build. And there are a few little plastic pieces as well that we need to actually install. I've got, let's just pop that there. I've got my new foam to foam glue. I've got a knife. I may need a pair of tweezers during this part of the build. That's pretty much it though. So let me cut the parts out that we need for the first stage of the build of the nacelle, and we'll get cracking. So the parts I've got here are D1, D2 and D3. I've got a plywood part W1, and I've got a little 3mm magnet as well. And obviously this is the front, the nose of the nacelle, and we should be able to build this in sequence. So D1 goes to D2, etc. So let's just install our first part. Now, with the foam glue, this is always an interesting time, depending on how warm it is and how warm your hands are when you open it for the first time. So I tend to open it so that it's upright, so that I've got gravity helping me, and it doesn't all come flooding out. Well, it does anyway. There we go. And so what we need to do is just wipe that away with a cloth. So just get rid of that. It's usually the ambient temperature plus my hot little hands that are causing that to splurge out. But anyway, we only need a little bit of glue, and I can just pop that onto our first part, pop the top back on, pop that to one side, and then install D1 into D2. That should just go into the slot there. We've got a little bit of excess glue, but we'll just let that dry off and shrink back. Now what we'll do is install the plywood part onto D3, and it basically mirrors the part itself. It's fairly identical to the two parts are pretty much identical, apart from a little bump there and the hole cut into the plywood which accommodates the magnet, which we'll install a little bit later on. So let's bring those two parts together. I'm actually going to pop that one down and apply the glue to the plywood itself. It's still coming out quite dramatically, but we'll go with that. That's fine. We need a little bit of weight up front anyway. Bring those two parts together. Ensure the slots are lined up, the two little slots either side, and that's where the mount itself actually sits. The motor mount, the ply motor mount, slots into there, so as to not impede it when we do install it. Those slots can be lined up. That's a good thing. And the other thing we can do at this point is just add a little bit of glue to the hole there and pop our magnet in place. This glue really is coming out. Just put it away and then pop our magnet in place. Now, it's easy enough. We do it with the pliers, tweezers, and of course they're plastic as well, so you don't have the magnet wanting to attach itself to a plastic tweezer, whereas if you were using something metal, then it would be very difficult to get that in place. Okay, so now what we do is install these two assemblies together, and they sit together like that. So we've got our little protruding D1 on the front, and we've got our plywood on the back. Now, just before we bring them together, I'm going to remove that little piece from the middle there, just by cutting it like so. There we go. It has no function really, so we might as well get rid of it. And let's continue with the build. So the D2, D1 assembly sits onto the D3 part, and there should be a lip all the way round, and D2 sits within there. And if we add a little bit of glue to the back and bring the parts together fairly rapidly, then we'll have a little bit of what I call slip time. We can move the part around and position it accurately. That for now. Bring the two together, keeping the plywood on the back side of the assembly, and then just pop that so that there's a nice even line on that top, nice even ledge on the outside there. You can see there's a little bit more of an edge at the bottom there, but as long as it's fairly even in that top section, that's what we're really aiming for. And also you can line up the central hole as well. That's probably the most sensible thing to do. So we can put that down now. That's complete, and we can move on to the second stage. I'll just get the parts prepared and we'll come back and take a look. Just getting P1 ready, the plastic part, our first plastic part of the build. And so here we've got two D4s, a D5, a D6, and our P1 part, and another little 3mm by 1mm magnet. So the first thing we're actually going to do is attach the plastic to our D6 part, and that just sits once again slots lining up over the front, and there's a little bit of a margin around the edge. Try and get that as even as possible. So let's hope our glue's calming down. Yep, it's not rushing out now. Not volcanic like it was to start off with. So we just bring those two parts together and we can set them aside for now. Good. Not good. To pop that down, noticed it's over to one side. So let's even it up. That's the great thing about this foam to foam glue, is that you do get that slippage time. But as we'll see with this next stage, you can actually use it as a contact adhesive as well. These D4 parts have obviously got a very distinctive shape. This part here is the front of the nacelle, going to the rear of the nacelle here. So this part that we've created, being the front of the nacelle, the part slots in to the little recess that we've got there. So what I'm going to do, obviously the other D4 part sits on the other side, so I'm just going to fill that with a bit of glue, and on the other side too. And then I'm going to bring both parts, both D4s, to bear in where they will be sitting, and just make sure that there's some glue transferred over to that part, and same for the other side. Go. And actually what I'm going to do as well is just put a little bit of glue either side of the slots too, where the parts sit. Turn it up this way again to stop it pouring out. Go. And what we'll do is we'll let the glue dry out for a few minutes and come back, and then we can attach our side parts of the nacelle to the nose part, and hopefully with the properties of the glue, when it's dry, it'll grab and it'll be very stable. We won't need to hold it in place. So let's just pop that down. Whilst that's drying off, we can insert our little magnet, and that goes into this hole here. The plastic side of the hole has been cut slightly too small, so what we can actually do is insert the magnet from behind, and it should capture it within the space. So let's just put a little bit of glue in that whole area. I really just want it around the sides, but with the glue as it is at the moment, there's a little bit of an excess coming out. I'm just going to pop that into the hole there, and then push it through until it won't go anymore, and then you'll see that it's actually appeared on the other side here. There's a little bit of glue there, which I'm just going to wipe away with my finger. Good. So that's our magnet installed. And we can pop that to one side. That'll glue during the build. That'll dry during the build. And we'll come back and take a look. That's not completely, well, it doesn't have to be completely dry, but it's not sufficiently dry yet for it to grab. So what I'll do, we'll just leave that for a second, and I'll come back when it's good and ready. We have sufficiently dry glue, and we can attach our, notice the way up I'm orienting it, so we don't want it upside down. Anyway, let's continue. Pop our tongue into the groove, And the same on the other side, grabs straight away. Obviously with a grabbing glue like that, a contact adhesive, you need to make sure that you accurately position your parts, otherwise you're going to have to try and move it. And of course that, although with the foam to foam you can do that, as with most contact adhesives, you weaken the glue if you start moving stuff around. So there we go, we've got our two parts in position. They're running parallel to each other. There's obviously they're slightly splaying out at the moment, but that'll all be brought in. We can now install D5, which is just a little bulkhead that sits in the next set of slots along the way. I'm just dry fitting it just to make sure that it sits where it should. And then I am just going to add a few dabs of glue. Because of the slots, the whole structure stays together quite nicely without too much in the way of glue. So I'm just going to put a little in so it just holds it in place. Obviously the less glue that we can use on the whole build, the better, because glue is weight, and weight is not our friend. Certainly when you're building micro radio controlled aircraft. So there we go. Oh, and there's one piece I've forgotten. And that is our motor mount. And that really should be the next thing we install, because it's got a little tongue that slots into the back of our next bulkhead. Free now, there we go. So these little mushroom tabs here slot into the holes that are available at the front of the assembly, in the little ply part W1 that we mounted there. They are quite tight, because obviously they need to stay there. So if you find you're having difficulty inserting them, then get a sanding stick and just take the edge off, as they say. Just going to thin it up at the front as well, just to make it easier for everything to slot in. Right, let's see how we've done. Now, the one on the right is being a little bit difficult, so give that a little bit more. There we go. And I'm also, because the W2 motor mount part sits on the sides of the structure, just going to add a couple of little dabs of glue to hold it in place once it's installed. Let's go again. There we go. Perfect fit. And then just make sure we get some glue on the underside of the ply part, and then we know that when it comes to bringing it all together, it should stick nicely. So our next bulkhead sits back on the next set of slots on the D4 parts, and you'll see that the little tongue on the plywood slots into the thinner slot within the structure itself. So what I'm going to do, just add a little bit of glue to hold the bulkhead in place once it's installed. Again, as you can see, I'm holding the glue upright to stop things spewing out. I'm not going to put any in the slot there. That's a good sort of friction fit, and I'm just going to put a little. Helps when you if you do get a blob coming out, you squeeze very gently squeeze the sides of the glue. It obviously tries to increase the volume in there and pulls the glue back. So, and I'm actually using that technique to control the glue coming out now as well. So, okay. What you will find during the build is that you'll have to clean that nozzle now and again, and sometimes clean your hands off as well, because the glue does get on there. And if you do get a decent amount of glue on your hands, of course you can transfer it to the model itself, which is never a good thing. I mean, it will clean off, but it's better to not get it there in the first place. So there we go. So our little structure there is all nice and neat. We've got our magnets in place, and we're ready to take the next step. So let me get the parts ready for that, and we'll come back and carry on. So we've just got our D8, D9 for D7, D8, D9 and D10 parts, and get rid of the little bits of flotsam and jetsam that are left in there. On D7 there is a score that runs across the tail there, and the idea is that it folds to create a sharp angle. Now if your score isn't particularly deep to create that angle, then just gently run your blade through it. Don't obviously go all the way through, but so there, mine now folds nicely. And what we can do is assemble these parts. So what we're going to do is get D7 and D9 and stick those together. There are two little protrusions, little tabs on D9 that go through the slots on D7. You just see how that happens there, and you can see the score is allowing that structure to bend down or conform to the shape of D9. So I've dry fitted that. I'm just going to obviously attach that just to start creating the tail section of the nacelle. Like so. Go, and then we can start adding D8 and D10 to the structure. I'll just show you where this goes. This, you've got your various slots that should hopefully all line up. As you'll notice with this this particular material, it's quite flexible and relatively sort of soft, so it can be manipulated and pulled around. It's not going to crack or fail on you. So it's don't be afraid to sort of bend and push it into place. It should all be cut relatively accurately, so you get some a good fit. But it's just and with a good fit, of course, you don't need too much glue. So the two slots do their job there. Make sure that it's aligned with everything and fits flush. and then we'll pop our D10 part in place. I won't bother dry fitting that, although you can. I'm fairly confident it's gonna fit. Fingers crossed. Just slots down there, and there's what I call a split tab, but it should all press, and the top of D10 comes through and is flush with the top of the flat surface of D7. So that puts our all our parts together like so, and now this slots into our main assembly with these two prongs actually sitting into the slots that are cut into our bulkhead here. Then everything else should fall into place. As I said, it's usually quite tight, and don't be afraid to pull things around a bit. I'm going to dry fit this first, just to make sure that everything is as it should be. So just you can see I'm sort of really pulling things around, and because I haven't let the that part dry, or the last part that we put together dry, it's all sort of coming apart a bit, but that's all right. It'll all push back together again, and you can see there it all fits nicely once it's all together. So that was a dry fit. Let's just bring everything away, just make sure that's all pressed together again. And once that is stable, or the glue is dried, we will bring it all together. Right, on with installing our little tail section. So let's just add a little bit of glue where things come into contact. So little tabs at the front here. And where they settle on the bulkhead here. And also on the little tabs at the back that sit on the slots in D10. And then we've got a little bit across the top here, and a little bit there too. So actually, whilst we're at it, let's just put a little bit on the internal part there. It's hard to reach on the main assembly. So in we go. We want to try and do this before any of the glue dries too much, because obviously we want to shift everything around. There's a little bit of glue squidged out there. I'll get rid of that. Clean my hands as well at the same time. So just making sure that glue is sort of transferred to the surfaces that we need to stick together, but it's something that we can allow the glue to dry somewhat once we've got everything in place, and then just we don't have to, as I said, we don't have to hold that. We've just got glue where we need it now, and once it's dried a bit, we can press everything together to make sure that it stays in place. So you can use a few tools to make sure that everything seats properly. Everything slots in where it's supposed to. So as I said, the material is pretty flexible, so if you do need to sort of pull and push it, that's fine. Good. Right. Well, we'll let that dry off a little bit, and we'll come back to that and push everything together once the glue has that grab quality about it. And we'll move on to install the underside of the nacelle, which is our part D11. So let's just get that off the sheet. Go. And this just sits on the underside. There are various, we've got a split slot at the back there, goes in. Now that went in quite nicely, but if you are having trouble getting something into a slot, then you just press the foam so it tapers slightly, and then pop it in like so. And then, as you'll see, this actually falls into place on the bottom there, like so. And it's just a dry fit. There's a little bit of stuff in the slot there. So what we can do now is just add a little bit of glue to the areas that need it. Just on the bottom here. The edges. At the front there. Where it goes. Across the bulkheads. So I think we'll put that too. And slot at the back. Good. So let's just pop that on. Into the slot. And then everything should fall into place like so. Let's just press everything home at the back too. Go. Excellent. So nearly there. We've just got to put our wheel section on now. So let me just get the parts to start that process. So the parts we've got to fit now are pretty small, pretty diddy, but nonetheless, we'll go ahead and do D12 and D13 go together like so. We'll just glue that in place. Being diddy, they don't need a great deal of glue to keep them in place, and in fact I'm just going to do add a little bit of glue where the other two are going to slot in as well, namely the cruciform there and or the junction there and at the base. So let's just pop our parts together, and then we should be able to slot these other parts in place too, like so, and a tiny little piece at the bottom there, just creating that curve on the lower edge. Make sure everything is lined up well. There we go. And this then actually just sits, there's a slot there that takes the little tab at the top of our D13 part, and then these little tabs as well go into the other slots in D11. So literally just sits in like that. So we can just add a little bit of glue to keep it in place. The joys of glue on your fingers. So there we have it, all in place. Now just to fit our wheels and the side panels. Let me just grab all of that, and we'll crack on. So here we have our plastic parts here, and we've got a wheel, we've got carbon fiber axle, which we're going to have to cut down to size, and we've got our D16 side panels. So the plastic parts are P2 and P3. They, as you can see, they are different in the fact that they're mirrored, which will help when we're installing, get the hole on the right side. So these parts are also scored as well. So if you pick them up, you should be along the score line, be able to fold them like so. So we'll just do that. There we go, and those install onto the D16 parts. They literally just sit on the bottom corner with the hole cut in the plastic part lining up with the hole cut in the foam part, like so. So we're just going to glue those into place, and we're going to use the contact adhesive qualities of our foam to foam glue. So I've got some glue on the surface there. I'm just going to transfer it now to the foam by just pressing that in place in the correct position. And then just going to take it off, pop those two parts to one side there so we know that's installing onto that part. And then we'll do exactly the same on this side too. Now, obviously, the plastic part here helps to strengthen the whole position of the wheel. With takeoffs and landings, it can endure quite heavy punishment. So, having this plastic in place strengthens the position of the wheel and the axle in the foam. The foam would tend to, after a while, just open up, and you'd have a very unstable undercarriage. Whereas with this little plastic reinforcement part, I still haven't had any problems on the aircraft that I've been flying that have got this sort of setup. Right, axle time. Now we need 16 millimeters of carbon fiber rod. So I'm going to measure that up. So I've got 16 mil there. I'm going to take my scalpel. I'm not actually going to try and cut all the way through. What I'm going to do is just roll it so that I get a cut all around the edge of that carbon fiber, and then just keep rolling, and it should eventually cut through. And make a mess of my new cutting board in the process by getting black carbon fiber dust all over the place. Okay, so it's sufficiently through now. I can just break it off like so. Pop that to one side for our other nacelle, although I've obviously built our other nacelle. I'm just going to sand lightly that cutting edge, or that cut edge, I should say. And there is our axle. So we'll just pop that to one side. We've got a couple of little washers as well, just plastic washers, to help with the movement of the wheel once it's installed, so it doesn't catch too much. Right. Let's just pop this into place. Go, and it should just press and stay. Go. Next one. A premature sticking. So obviously the key here is to get those holes lined up. Otherwise the axle's going to have a job of sitting in the right place. So there we go. That's all in place. Now I can pop my axle into one of the holes. Obviously it doesn't go all the way through, so it's held in place there. What I can actually do, as a little added bit of security, is just pop a small amount of glue on the tip of the carbon fibre there. What I don't want is too much, so it splurges out the sides and actually then catches on the washer. So pop that there, stick my washer onto the axle, like so, pop my wheel through, there we go, second washer on, and then I can put the side piece on like so. There we go. So that's our wheel constructed. And that should give us plenty of movement on the wheel itself, but obviously we haven't got this fixed onto anything at the moment, so we need to install that, and it's pretty obvious where it goes. That installs onto the structure there, and then you've got the wheel that spins nicely in its housing. So let's just pop some glue in to secure it. And I'm going to be relatively generous here, because obviously this is something that does get a little bit of punishment. Or when I say punishment, it's just forces exerted on it during takeoff and landing. So obviously what I want to avoid doing is getting glue on the wheel itself or on the axle. So just carefully place everything together. There we go, and I can come back to that once the glue is completely dried off, and just press everything firmly just to make sure it's all sitting where it should be sitting. Excellent. So now we have two nacelles ready to be skinned with our Tyvek material. So here is one that I made earlier, our skinned nacelle. And to actually create or shape the skin to fit over our frame, we're going to need a few things. Firstly, our steel rule is going to come in handy. Also, a paintbrush. We're not going to paint anything with it, but we're going to use the handle to help us shape the whole thing. And of course, our trusty scalpel too. There may be a few other bits and pieces. Obviously, we're going to need the glue, and foam to foam is the ideal glue for Tyvek. So there's that as well. Let me get all the parts together, or some of the parts together, to start off the skinning of our nacelle. So here are our first parts. Let's just pop the completed nacelle to one side. There we go. There. And the parts that we've got are T1 and T2, T3 and T4. And this is actually to make the lower portion of the nacelle that shrouds the wheel. Where we start is by applying our T2 to the back of T1, and it acts as a strengthener for the bottom of the part that is exposed around the wheel itself. So with Tyvek, the best way of attaching or laminating two parts is by making sure that you've got a good even spread of glue over both parts. So just going to use using the sort of the tip of the glue pressed up gently against the part itself to ensure that the glue spreads around the entire surface of the part as evenly as possible, so I don't get any big blobs and I don't get any gaps. So let's just then apply that wet to the part, and that gives us some slip time to make sure that it is properly pushed down and even. And what we can do is turn the part over to see if we've got any overlaps, which we haven't. And it's at this point I'd suggest that you make sure that your fingers are clean from any of that glue, so that you don't get glue all over the printed surface of your part. Now, with all that pressed home nicely, what I'm trying to make sure is that there are no air gaps in there, no excess glue or anything like that. And then when you are sort of feeling along that edge, you can feel that because this is all laser cut, that edge is slightly raised up. Now, you don't have to, but you can actually press that down a little, just using the back edge of the knife. Be careful when you're doing that. Obviously, you've got a blade here, so you just got to be aware that that's there and that doesn't cut into your hand. And then just push the material down like so. Go. And you can actually do that on this side too. I'm not using a great deal of pressure, I'm just running it along the edge there, and that feels much better. It's not so raised. So we're going to let that dry off, let the glue do its work. We're going to turn our attentions to our next two pieces, the T3, T4. You'll notice on T3 there's a score across it, and that's where we fold this part once again so that it can laminate and strengthen itself with I've got glue on my hands, just beating that up and getting it off. So what we're going to do is add a little bit of glue in our using our special smearing technique, using the pressure of the tip of the tube just to equally spread and evenly spread the glue. then fold over, bring that to bear, like so. And then we can pop that to one side once again to dry off. Now, on the T4 part, we have an unusual shape with basically two sort of little wings around a central spar. So if I do that, you'll be able to see. So there's one of our little wings, and what I'm going to do using the back edge of my knife is just score. So you can see I'm scoring the back of the part, not the front of the part. So that's the unprinted side. So I'm just going to score there, and then I'm going to turn that around and do exactly the same on the other side too, which will leave me with a central portion that's around about 2 millimeters wide, coincidentally the same width as the thickness as the foam. There we go, and that gives us a little score either side, so we can fold this like so. There we go. Now, coming back to T3, we're going to use the edge of our folded part as a guide for scoring the little tabs. So I'm just using once again the back edge of the knife, not the front of the knife, not the blade, the back edge, just to put a score down the unprinted side of the Tyvek, and that should mean that our little tabs now quite happy to fold down like so. So we're actually going to install this onto our frame. So here's the one we built earlier, and this little part just sits so that that tongue there sits onto the back of the frame like so. I'm actually going to, seeing that, I'm going to just score there, our double skin, so that I can more easily install this. A little bit of a fold there. I'm just going to add some glue to that back edge, the cross member there, and then down the central keel as well. I guess you can call it a keel. Then bring my part to bear on the situation. There we go. So we transfer some glue to both. Now I'm just going to leave that there. It's not sitting exactly where I want it, but it is sitting so that the glue can dry, and then I can push it down, and it should stay where it needs to. So let's just pop that one side there whilst that does its thing. I'll just pop that over there too, and whilst that is drying, we're going to shape our little wheel or pant shroud. And to do this, we're going to use our paintbrush. So literally just using it to coerce the material into a curve in the center of the part, or the two parts. And obviously this forms the front of the wheel portion of the nacelle. So it's pretty easy. You'll find it is, and all I'm doing is obviously putting the paintbrush at the back and just rolling it through using my thumb with a bit of pressure, just to, there we go. And then these little tabs here, these just fold forward at their base, and they splay out. They will be covered by the next part that we put on, but it holds that whole sort of front portion stably in place. So now we have our little sort of shrouded area there, and we'll put that to one side for now, and we will attend to our little parts at the back of this structure. So that's all pushed down, and then our T4 goes on as an extension of T3 down the rear keel there, so you can literally just pop it on there. The little tabs fold down the side. Now they don't stick, they just stay there. In fact, you can splay them out a bit, and when it comes to putting the larger piece on, the larger piece of Tyvek on, we should get them to marry up quite nicely. So there we go, that's popped in place. We'll let that dry off, but whilst that's drying, we should just be able to show how this whole structure wraps around like so. There we go. We'll let the glue dry on those parts, and we'll come back and finish off this little section. So attaching our Tyvek now, we can offer it up and dry fit it, and what you'll see is that the tabs at the front splay out across the base of the internal structure, and what you need to do is get this relatively centered, so that the sides evenly go around the structure itself. It's not hard to do. You'll see when these splay out that they should fit sort of flush with our little underpart within the internal structure. And what we can do is we can actually progressively stick this to our little project here. So we'll just start the stick at the front here. We'll put some glue onto the tabs themselves, like so. And we'll just pop some glue on the key areas that the Tyvek comes into contact with. Go. So we're not attempting to stick it down the sides just yet. We're just going to fix it to the front portion of the nacelle, just concentrating on getting it centered so that we have an even amount of material on either side. And once you get the front attached here, it should be flush with the bottom of the foam parts. So you probably just need to sort of slide it down and just make sure it's pulled round so that it's sitting where it needs to. I'm just going to push those tabs down as well. They don't necessarily stick down, but at least they've transferred the glue that was on them to the foam, and we should be able to press that down a little bit later. So we'll let that set, and then we will continue with sticking the rest of the Tyvek down to the structure. So now that's settling down at the front there, we're going to add some glue to the sides. So I want to make sure that it's all stuck down at the sort of the extremities, and we will add some glue onto the tabs on the little parts that we stuck on previously. I'm going to do that on both sides, and we're just going to use the transfer of glue from one part to the other to assist with the attachments. So the other area that we need to stick down are these side bits here. We're just going to put a little bit of glue on there. We're not going to go crazy, because they will be hidden and further secured by the next part of the build. So let's just fold this around, make sure we get glue onto both surfaces. Just pull that out a bit. Okay. I'm just going to let that fall out like so that the glue has a chance to dry up a little. And once again, make sure the glue is on both surfaces. Go, just let that dry out, and then with some confidence we will bring these flaps back to bear. So should have had enough time now to be contact adhesive ready. Okay. And round to the other side. Nice and evenly matched either side. And then we can actually, once again, we can use the back edge of our knife to just make sure everything is pressed firmly, so that everything makes proper contact, and everything else should press down nicely in place so that we've got our lower portion of the nacelle covered. There we go. Right, so that part is done. So we can now focus on shaping our upper part and get that installed onto the nacelle. So the next part of the build involves just two pieces of Tyvek, but there's a bit of work that we've got to do before we actually install this onto the nacelle structure. First of all, it helps if we shape the Tyvek and the Tyvek, as you can see with the completed nacelle, the Tyvek bends at these 2 points here around the bottom of the nacelle. So what we can do to help that is just use our paintbrush handle just to put a bend in the Tyvek at those strategic points. So like so. Also, these portions of the Tyvek actually are used to help adhere the nacelle to the wing itself. As you can see here, they actually sort of bend outwards and will stick to the underside of the wing during the installation process. So to do that, we need to score these, but we're actually going to score on the printed side. And when we're doing that, I don't tend to use the back of the blade or the front. I'll actually use the back of the handle. What I'll do is I'll just run this down the area that I want to bend outwards to put a softer score into the material. So you'll notice on this part we've got a little notch cut here, and this is to show you exactly where your score should end. So that should help when you're doing this. I'm angling the handle, so I'm sort of getting one edge of the handle. You might find that there are other tools in your arsenal that could do an equal job, or even maybe a better job. If there are, let me know about it. But for now, I'm using this back of the handle, back of the knife technique. So there we go. And whilst we're here, we might as well start the process. So the idea of scoring is to really minimize the amount of creasing that you get in the material itself, so it looks just a little more realistic. So let's just re-establish our curves there. This is maybe something that I did in the wrong order, so maybe do the outer scoring first, and then put these curves in. There we go. Right, and the other thing we need to do is our little piece here needs scoring too, right down the center of the arrows, but we're going to do that on the back. So we're doing it on the back. Use the back of the blade, because we can be a little more aggressive. A couple of times, and that should fold like so. Now we're actually going to shape and bring together this part before we put it onto the nacelle structure. This piece that we've just scored is a joining piece for the two parts to meet at the rear of the nacelle, like so. So what we're going to do is actually install that now, and then bring the back edge of the nacelle together before we install it onto the foam structure. you can see I'm putting it high on the on the edge there, up towards the top of the nacelle at the back. And although it's not dry or firmly stuck yet, what I'll do is I will just add some glue to the other surface. And just transfer across to the other side. Then I'll let that dry and use the contact adhesive properties to bring that part together. Okay, now let's bring these two bits together, two bits of the same part. And once again, what you can do here is a little smoothing down technique. Just to reduce the amount of edge you're getting. There we go. So as you can see now, it's formed almost looks like a boat with a hole in the bottom. And this sits onto our nacelle like so. So it should be a fairly snug fit. Obviously what we're trying to do is get everything nicely in place. The front edge of this part should be flush with the first so the second 2mm part. It should be there or thereabouts, so it's pushing right up against the leg there. And as we come down here, you should the top edge of the sheet here should be flush with the top edge of the foam itself. So just to make sure, that should come all the way back to the back edge of the part as well. So that's how it's supposed to sit. Obviously we want it stuck down and as sort of flush, no gaps. So what we need to do is just make sure that we've got glue in the right places to hold everything down, including the Tyvek to Tyvek join here too. So what we can set about doing now, as he throws the knife across the board, is to get our glue down in the areas that it needs to be to secure the Tyvek. So obviously at the front edge there, and then where the Tyvek comes up to the plywood mount, and then all along where it's going to sit like so. Flip that over, do the other side. Go, and also onto the Tyvek here too. And then you can add additional little blobs where you think it's going to be useful. So like around the base of the leg, before it dries off too much, we ought to slide this on. And get it into position. So flush with the front. And then flush with the top of the structure too. Good. So we'll let the glue dry somewhat. This may fall away, but we've got glue spread on both surfaces now. So we can press that all together once it's all dried off. So now we have two covered nacelles, and obviously there are some other bits and pieces that need to be done to the nacelles to complete them. We've got the vac formed cowls to sit on the front. We've obviously got to also install the motors themselves, and these have got to then be installed onto the wings. But for now, that probably gets us to the place we need to be to enable us to install these when it's necessary. There's one thing I forgot that we can actually achieve before we move on from the nacelles, and that is a little bit of bling, a little bit of aviation bling. We can pop on the exhaust pipes. So let's just remove these from the plastic. So this is 2 P6s. So they actually come in 2 parts, but there we go. We're going to stick those two together. We'll get the other ones off as well. So they're literally 2-part pieces of plastic that glue together. Let's just stop messing around and get the glue on. And all these are just profile details. They do lift the look and scale look of the nacelles. So let's just pop that in place. Go. Make sure it's all sitting well. Good. We'll do the other one. It's just a matter of getting a little bit of glue everywhere, so they stick together. And then there's a little trick to installing them into the nacelles. It's fairly straightforward. Go to one side. You'll notice on one side of the nacelles there, you've got this darker line here, which really represents the shadow cast by the panel that sits there, and there are some slots cut in the Tyvek where these little pieces can go into, but you might find that they come up against some resistance because we've got the foam the other side. So what we can do is just using our blade is just free up some space there. Then little exhaust pipes can fix into place like so. What you can do before you do that though is you can bend the little tabs down slightly so that the exhaust is angled, so that when you look at it you're looking at it side on, so you don't necessarily see that it's just a profile piece. It actually is obviously printed to look three-dimensional. So put that all into place. And there we go, and you've got a little bit of exhaust staining down the nacelle as well, just to add to the realism. So there we go. So to position that, all we need to do is just add a little bit of glue to each of the tabs. Then pop it in place. There we go. Fantastic. Looks even better. Good. So I'll finish off that one with our other exhaust pipe, and we shall move on to do the fuselage.